As we bring the first season of Eyes on Impact to a close, we do so with heavy hearts. Brad Sousa, Chief Technology Officer at AVI Systems and host of this podcast, died suddenly and unexpectedly in November of 2023. With blessings from the Sousa family, we share as a tribute to Brad the last 2 episodes he recorded. Thanks for listening.
I don't know if you realize it or not, but most of the work that you and I do has a direct global impact. To me, it doesn't matter if we're talking about Paris, France or Paris, Texas. Much of what we do is about connecting people all over the planet. And that's why I'm excited to have with us today Sean Sadler from CGI in the UK. On this episode of Eyes on Impact, Sean and I challenge the idea of what true digital transformation is. And how, if technology is going to transform our organizations, we have to consider people first. We jump headfirst into the state of generative AI. And hear me on this. I have tech leaders all the time say things like, Brad, AI is the disruption that's changed everything that we just changed. We'll talk about what Microsoft is planning with AI and then ask ourselves, is the disruption that AI brings on the same scale and order of magnitude of the disruption that the pandemic just brought? We'll also be honest with ourselves about the role of tech leadership as it relates to sustainability and climate change. We'll even dig a little bit deeper into the different priorities of sustainability in the US and the priorities of sustainability across the pond. But before we get all fired up about this conversation, I want to just take a moment and say thank you to our friends at LG who have been a great global partner of AVI's for a long, long time. Thanks, LG, for sponsoring today's episode of Eyes on Impact. So what do you say? You fired up for this? All right, man, let's get after it. Well, Sean, it's great to have you here with us. I'm excited about our conversation today. First, I just want to say thank you for giving us your time. You're an interesting fellow. The things I've read and speeches I've heard you give or keynotes and so forth. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Help us get started by maybe talking a little bit about CGI, what CGI does, your role at CGI.
Well, good afternoon, Brad. It's good to meet you. I'm very excited as well. It's a great opportunity to talk and to share information and collaborate. So CGI, global IT services company that's been going for, I'm going to get shot now, but it's been going for years. Since about 1976, I believe, actually, when it first incorporated. And as I say, it's global. It's over 90,000 employees now. And in the UK, I head up the Microsoft advisory practice for CGI. And that really entails advising clients on how they can migrate to the cloud, once they're in the cloud, how they can optimize their spend. But also we get asked to come in and help them with how they can become more productive, more efficient, and also where they have maybe gone by themselves previously or used another supplier, and their environment isn't great at this present time. That's where we come in and really sort of turn things around. And then the other side of it is the 365 practice. So that's looking at obviously all the elements of 365 environment, also Power Platform, and then of course the thing that's come to the fore right now, that unless you've been hiding somewhere, you've heard of it as Copilot. So very exciting time.
Yeah, that is exciting. And we have a very strong Microsoft practice as well here in the US. MRPP partner, O365 with an emphasis on Teams and collaboration, but also app dev and Azure and all that kind of good stuff. So I'm excited about having that conversation with you and the things that you're learning. I like you, I'm excited about Copilot and what that means for us and what that mostly means for our customers. As you've got a pretty diverse background. You've been in the public sector, the private sector, I think. And I mean, have there been some experiences, maybe a place you've worked or somebody you've worked with that has really shaped the way you think about your role as a tech leader?
That's a really good question, Brad. I think I've been very fortunate actually in my career that I've had several mentors. Really, when I have been a bit stuck about what my future career direction looks like and how best to achieve it, that's when I've really looked up to people that where I value their opinion. They've obviously got to where they are because they're not just intelligent, but they're very good from a business perspective. But also, I think communication skills is obviously something that's really vital. And yeah, that when I was back at Convergent Systems, there was a guy called Rufus. He was like the CTO, and he gave me some really good advice about, or as we've probably all heard, about networking. Yeah, it's really about trying to come out of that IT silo. And it was a number of years ago anyway, but I think it's fair to say there's been a stereotype around IT and that we very much work in our silos and it's business and it's IT. And how do you make sure actually that business sees IT as very much one and the same, a real enabler for business can do?
Yeah, so that's so important. And today, as I talk with CIOs and CTOs and IT leaders, I think one of the big challenges is that many in our space still believe that IT is more of a utility. It's something I have to do to take care of workers. And they themselves don't think that they really have a stake in the outcome of the business or the success of it. I mean, how do you communicate the idea that IT is not like plumbing or HVAC? It's actually going to make or break your ability to accomplish your organizational goals.
Yeah, I mean, as we all know, IT is it is such an important aspect now of business, and it is an important aspect of an enabler of the business. And without it, businesses just can't function. So,
Right.
And I think that really came to the fore to COVID, when suddenly IT stock really increased because they suddenly had to provide that remote capability for people to be able to collaborate
Right.
and still operate as they did, but obviously in a different world and very quickly. And I think they had a lot of brownie points. I think the challenge has then been how do you build upon that? How do you continue to demonstrate that IT provides real value to a business, to an organisation? And I think as technology evolves and the use cases for that evolve, and this is where it's really understanding the business, isn't it? Ultimately, obviously AI is the topic of conversation for today, especially
Right.
generative AI. But it's much like the same as all technologies in the fact that it's not the answer is this technology. Now, what's the question? It's really what business problem are you trying to solve? And when IT leaders are able to marry that up with the technology and make sure that it delivers what the business needs, that's when they have the greatest success.
Yeah. So Sean, I love that. I was out to dinner a while ago with a friend um, who also is a customer. She's the CIO of a large organization, and her and her husband and I were all out to dinner, and at one point in the meal, she just kind of starts chuckling a little bit to herself, and I'm like, okay, what's up? She said to me, Brad, I don't want to offend you, but the video collaboration media part of the tech space that you're in, pre-pandemic, it wasn't even on my radar. Somebody took care of that. I didn't even think about it. But post-pandemic, it's like it's integrated into 3 of my top 5 deliverables to my CEO. So if we don't succeed at collaboration, if we don't succeed at helping the workforce re-engage back at the office, if we don't succeed, and she had this list, I can't deliver on it. So IT became critical to their organization's operations. I mean, you obviously believe that. What are 2 or 3 critical issues that CEOs have to solve that IT can actually accelerate?
I think I think ultimately it hasn't really changed for business in what they're looking to do. Um, they're looking to do things quicker. They're looking to do things more, more cost effectively. And they're looking to have that unique selling point, aren't they? That USP. So those I think are the three things that CEOs always looking to enhance. And really, with technology, you can achieve all three things. When implemented in the right way, when you understand, as we talked about, what are the business challenges, where does what are the business goals, where do you actually want to get to as an organisation? Then you can position the technology accordingly to optimize your operations. So obviously today you now have lots of chatbots, virtual agents, and all the rest of it, which can be 24/7. So you're not having to rely on being able to earn any during a certain amount of time. But also you've got things such as RPA, haven't you? So you can take manual, repetitive tasks out of the equation, and actually they can be, churned out as and when those tasks arise. And you're really optimizing the headcount you require for that. But at the same time, we talked about how you can actually repurpose those people within the team so that they can do more creative work, and that's actually going to provide more value for the company.
Oh, I love that. So I want to dig a little deeper in this idea of digital transformation, and I'm going to read something that I attribute to you. Now, I may be paraphrasing this, so forgive me if I am. The statement is, if digital transformation is going to be effective, then you have to consider the people that are involved. And this was a statement that I heard you make, and I think the context of it was that if you're actually going to be transformative to the organization, it's going to start with transforming people, not just the tech itself, but focused on.
Yeah.
So have I caught that right? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Talk about that a little bit. I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, again, it comes down to technology is the enabler, but technology about the people to adopt it, to be able to adapt their working behaviours, to be able to get the best out of it. It's just a technology, isn't it? And so, yeah, to your point, any successful digital transformation, certainly any sustainable digital transformation, relies upon ensuring that your people are very much part of that process and very much on the bus, so to speak. And that's where business change comes in, is making sure that obviously that they understand the rationale why they're doing this. Because of course, I mean, AI, as we know, is gonna change our workforce, undeniably, possibly beyond recognition. But some people's view on it is a real positive because it's going to make their lives a lot more effective, efficient. So some of the mundane tasks that they do today are going to be made that much more efficient. And obviously, that's one of the things that Copilot is promising to do. Whereas other people will think, well, I don't necessarily have good digital literacy skills per se, and what I do today could be automated. AI could take over my job. So it's really, how do you ensure that both elements of the workforce, or even subsets of those, feel secure in that what their role is going to be. So any technological change addresses that. And actually, something that I learned a long time ago, I had the fortune to go on this executive management course, was talking about change with people, and an analogy was the change house. I don't know if you've heard of that at all, Brad, previously.
Yeah.
Where it starts off, everything's fine around here. The unconscious or incompetent side, there's no need to change. It becomes denial. Well, I don't see why we need to do this because everything's working just fine.
Right.
And then obviously it's having to accept, well, yeah, if we carry on the way we are, things aren't going to continue to be fine, because businesses, unless they continue to adapt and change, will go out of business ultimately.
Yeah, I love that. So we hear people say that people don't like change. And I don't know that I agree with that. I think people like the other side of change.
Yeah.
I don't think they like the process of change.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Right? How do you paint a picture, tell a story about the other side of change? Or what do you do to for your customers so that they embrace the process of change because they want to get to the other side of change?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So some of the assistance that we provide our clients is that very aspect. So it may be that they've implemented, and we talk about people being the most important aspect of it is because they may well come to us and say, we have implemented some changes. We have moved to the cloud. We now have some of our critical systems up there, but yet capability of the team is not where it needs to be. And they're not very forward looking. And actually, there seems to be a lot of reluctance and reticence to actually get on board and see this as a real positive for them. So that's where we come in and actually, really try and understand. And everyone's very different, aren't they? But it's really trying to understand where they're at today, why they feel the way they do, and really try and position. And some of it is because, you talk about the process of change and the fact that, I think people in it, when you've been in an infrastructure role for a number of years, you've got comfortable with that. You know what's expected of you. And if something is upgraded, then it's just something to learn on top of what you already do. But when it's complete change, as they see it, suddenly they're out of the comfort zone, and nobody likes to look stupid at the end of the day or feel stupid. And I think that on the whole is the sort of perception that we get back. So it's really trying to reposition it, reframe it, if you like, so that this is a great opportunity. This is where industry is going, and this is where you can continue to enhance your skills and keep current. So it's really trying to change their mindset in that respect instead.
Yeah, that's really good. So I was speaking at an executive summit, sharing at a summit recently, and the topic of AI was a hot topic everybody, of course, wanted to talk about. And a group of executives and leaders that was there, their response to me was, well, hang on, Brad. AI is the disruption that will change everything that we just changed. and the context of the conversation, which I thought was brilliant, was, we just went through this pandemic and everything changed, and AI is threatening to change everything yet again. The sentiment was that I'm not sure that we have the tolerance to change like that again. What do you think? I mean, is AI the disruption like on the order or the magnitude of the pandemic? What's your thoughts?
Well, I think there's two answers to my question. One is that, as you're aware as well, AI is not new.
That's right.
Yeah. AI has been around for a number of years.
Of course.
I think it's just now that obviously with large language models and generative AI suddenly become much more useful than it was. It was useful in certain cases, like narrow cases, but obviously now it can be applied across a whole load, whole load of use cases. And certainly, you start to have so we've had conversational AI for a while, but of course now we're going to another level. So I don't see it as something totally new, but of course it is an enhancement on what has gone before. But to answer your question about is it a disruptor? Then absolutely it is. But there's been many disruptors before, and as I said previously, if a business does not continue to change and adapt and embrace the new technologies that come along that are going to help it to keep level with its competitors, let alone actually, maintain its USP, then they will fall by the wayside. So I don't think it's a case of not having, I don't think there's a choice, is there, involved here? It's a case of do this or, not have such a healthy business.
So where do you think, so I think of impact, and in our language, we talk about it as human impact, technologies that impact people in such a way that it actually changes the trajectory of their life or of their organization. Where's the early big impact for generative AI? Is it around tech? Is it around jobs? Is it around ethics, technoethics? Where's the big impact you think that everybody's so concerned about?
Well, I think ethics is definitely something that they're concerned about.
For sure.
Yeah, I think when ChatGPT version 3 came out, 3.5, the fact that it was answering questions, giving you answers, and not saying I don't really know the answer to that question. It would give you an answer which wouldn't necessarily be correct, but it was the best answer that they had available, so therefore it gave it to you. And I think that's the concern, that it's trying to put in those safeguards. And obviously this has been recognised by our government and Rishi Sunak, have this AI summit for ethics. And also Joe Biden, I just saw this morning, I believe, that he had decreed some AI guidelines that need to be followed as well. So I think everyone's concerned about it. And I think it's like anything, isn't it? It's something that's quite powerful. It's making sure that it can't be used for ulterior motives.
So let's talk. I'd like to dig in this just a little bit deeper, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And the topic is really around AI and OI. So it's artificial intelligence and organic intelligence. And there's a lot of concern around the technoethics related to AI. And by the way, I totally get it. I have very deep concerns around the ethics regarding the AI. But I've begun, as I'm seeing AI, generative AI in particular, ChatGPT as an example, being integrated into work life more aggressively. I began to ask myself the question: will the ethics question begin to get solved because good people, organic intelligence, good people are going to write the guidelines and decide the way that AI is applied? Bad people will also make decisions and the outcome will be bad. But good people will make decisions and the outcome will be good. Do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I share your thoughts on that. So, as we know as well, I think the other thing that AI has suffered from today is this unconscious bias.
Right.
Yeah. So things such as facial recognition, a lot of the data, the images that have been provided previously were all white males, so white females as well. And there wasn't quite so much cross-section was there between black and Asian people. So facial recognition wasn't quite good. But that's just an example. But there's also been some sexual biases as well previously. I think the great thing is that that's been recognised and that is being addressed. But it's just making sure that, we talk a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion today. And it's trying to ensure that we encapsulate that within the AI ethics and guidelines going forwards. And, I have every confidence that will be the case. I think the other thing is that, Microsoft talk very much, Microsoft, this is very much a topic that they are a great deal of interest in, and they're at pains to point out that they are, following responsible AI practices. So they're putting guidelines by using OpenAI's, LLM within their products that actually it can't be used for anything that's not for good purposes, as you talked about here.
Yeah.
So there's some good safeguards being put in place there, and that will continue with most legitimate companies. Or you will obviously always have, and you're going to have this in every whatever technology you use.
That's right.
Look to circumvent those, create their own versions of AI that don't have those controls or guidelines in place. And I guess those are the elements that I'd be concerned about.
Get it. So what's your expectation? What should our expectations really be about the impact of AI in our businesses? I mean, is it really around optimization, or should our expectations be more than that?
Well, I think it's going to fundamentally change organizations, isn't it, ultimately? I mean, if you look at Amazon just recently, they've now started to get, this is where Terminator spoke, they've now started to deploy test robots, haven't they, in some of their warehouses that can actually have limbs and walk to pick up items that, again, would be very manual piece of work, like I think picking up empty cartons, etc. That not so interesting as well, pieces of work. But that is an example of where AI is going to continue to evolve and change the workplace. And actually, how I see it is that AI is going to work in tandem with human beings. So, so you'll have the human AI experience, which should be complementing each other. And I think it's also worth pointing out that the way we're looking at things today, and it's completely understandable, is that AI is going to create a lot of efficiencies. AI is potentially going to take people's jobs, but also, like other technologies, there'll be other jobs created.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I there's an interesting statistic is that of those college students, university students that graduated, sometime around the pandemic, the expectancy is that they'll have between 8 and 10 jobs, different career paths, different career jobs, by the time before they get to age 40. And one statistic I heard was that, or it's actually been repeated several times now, is that more than 2/3 of those jobs haven't even been created yet. And so one of the challenges for us as an organization with our customers is that, we're dealing with IT leaders, and I'll just focus in the area of collaboration as an example. A lot of our customers have a set of acronyms after their name, which associates their experience with certain brands of technologies. And the challenge for them is that their identity is so closely tied to a brand that they can't imagine an effective role for them without being tied to that specific brand. But maybe that brand's lost its relevance for a season of time. And so now they're in a quandary, and we find ourselves talking with them about imagining their role, but not necessarily tied to a specific brand or a specific technology, but tied to how they lead or tied to how they see technology used or applied, but not necessarily around a specific subset of technologies that they've invested a career in developing skills around. Are you seeing the same kind of thing? And if so, how do you help people kind of imagine maybe a different, better role?
So I'm not seeing any of that myself specifically, but we do work slightly different, environments, I guess, in that respect.
Sure.
But certainly, it became evident to me a number of years ago that you can't rest on your laurels.
Right.
You can't just assume that because you've got to a certain position and you've attained a certain amount of knowledge that you can then just put your feet up and relax and and you continue to be employed, because you won't. You've got to remain current, and that also means that you've got to come outside of your work environment and look at what's going on, in the rest of the world, and then really try and imagine things forward. Look into the future and think what are people going to look to focus on in the future, and also that comes down to though doing your research, reading from various channels or listening to podcasts such as this, so that you can keep abreast of what's going on. You can get some ideas, and then obviously you can then look to dedicate some time to upskilling, learning something new potentially.
Right. And I think that's part of our role with our customers, is to help them imagine a different way, right? And it wasn't so long ago that everybody's voice architecture, as an example, was on-prem.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's almost exclusively in the cloud, with the exception of some applications. And just the ability to reimagine that transformation was hard for some to make. And so I don't know, I guess for us, part of what we find ourselves doing is helping people imagine their role on the other side of change. And as a result of that, they're more willing to go through the process of change. You talk about this bigger, look beyond just your perspective of the world, look a bit bigger. And that brings in maybe the topic of sustainability and climate change, which I think is something that you're pretty passionate about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you believe that IT leaders have a unique ability to help organizations accelerate towards carbon neutrality, or make a difference with sustainability?
I do, undoubtedly, and for a number of reasons, really. One is education, educating organisations in the measures that they can take, and that comes again. That involves really coming out of your silo of what it is you're expected to do as an IT leader, and actually thinking more about being a business leader in that respect. But I think also it's acknowledging the fact that IT technology, even more so now with AI as well, is increasingly at the heart of businesses, how it's being used today. They're becoming increasingly reliant on it. Data centers are, continuing to grow. The carbon footprint of technology is continuing to grow. Apparently, it's now taken over the airline industry in terms of its global carbon footprint, and it's quite frightening, really, when you think about we are all under pressure, all the countries and I would say individuals as well, to try and reduce our carbon footprint. How can we try to ensure that we leave a world behind us that is at least as good as it is now, if not better, as opposed to something that, what we're seeing with weather extremes, that is potentially going to get worse. So we definitely need to act now. And I think with IT technology leaders, they have the wherewithal to do that. We know that we can reduce our carbon footprint for organizations, with that education, measuring, monitoring, etc. And it's something that is a passion I share with a number of other IT leaders as well. There's a specific group that we get together from time to time, and we share best practice, and ideas. And I think it's something that we should continue to really socialize and make sure that everybody, all IT leaders, are aware of how they can play their part.
I love that. So you're in the UK, I'm in the US. I sit on the board of a global tech association. Our organization does business in more than 60 countries. Um, there's a vast difference in how people view sustainability. At least my experience is. I'm curious if it's your experience, region by region. Europe has a very different view than the US has, which has a different view than Latin America or Asia Pac. And I guess my question to you is, first, do you also see that there's differing priorities and expectations on sustainability depending upon where you are in the world? And if you do, how do you help people develop a common vision around carbon neutrality or sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And I guess if you look at the UN's definition of sustainability as well, I think there's 17 goals that they define. And obviously climate change is one of those. But they are all very much linked, aren't they? We know that ice caps are melting. We know that actually fresh water, it will be at a premium in the years to come. We know that that's happening in faraway countries from us anyway, in the UK, certainly in the likes of Africa. There's, droughts are becoming more and more common. And it is something that I think the UK has become more aware of, the US has become more aware of. I think we are taking this more seriously because I guess we have that knowledge about what we can do to improve things and turn things around. I think it's also, though, that if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, on the whole, we are having our basic needs fulfilled. And we're able to think about something other than how do we feed ourselves,
Sure.
clothe ourselves. Well, I guess in some of the other poor countries, they don't have that luxury. And for them, it's all about, do whatever it takes just so they can get by every day. And obviously the war in Ukraine, etc., hasn't helped with that.
Right. I was talking with Adi Riazi, who's the CIO of Hearst Corporation. She was actually on a previous episode of this podcast, and she shared the perspective with me that she was in China and was visiting. I think she was working for the UN at the time, and was visiting this electronics recycling, and she saw a family, so parents, children, manually disassembling circuit boards, pulling components off. And she said that in that moment, she realized that that's her stuff, and that the mercury and lead and other hard metals that was transferring into the bodies of those people and those kids. That was a moment of inflection for her that fueled a desire to create change. How do you communicate? How do you get people on board, CIOs in particular, tech leaders in particular? Because most want to do something, but I'm finding that few have the latitude to actually do it. How do you communicate that moment of inflection that says, let's stop talking and start doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point, Braz, and obviously that, to hear that story, I think it really brings it home to you, doesn't it? And I think ultimately, people are different and, they will react in different ways. And,
of course.
And some of them may need a story such as that, in order for it to hit home. And others, unless it hits them right between the eyes, they're not going to sort of take notice. But, the way I see this and the way I guess I sell the benefits of IT leaders really taking it seriously is that ultimately, if you can take measures to reduce your carbon footprint, you are also predominantly, I'd say, saving costs because,
Yes.
for example, it may be that you're moving your stuff to the cloud, for instance, and you are implementing scripts or routines or maybe dynamic scaling so that you only use the resources available when you require them, and they're not just being continue to be consumed just in case. Yeah, and that's again obviously one of the benefits of the cloud. It'll be the same in the data center.
Right.
How do you we talked about things such as cooling in data centers, and actually a lot of those costs don't necessarily come to the IT leader, but it's really making sure that they can have full visibility of everything that they do today that is responsible for the services that they're providing, and having that full visibility. And I think that's another part of it, really, is having that full visibility and transparency of what the costs are today. And then saying, well, actually, do you know what? We can save costs on cooling because we don't need to cool it within an nth degree of these recommended settings.
Right.
And actually don't need to keep replacing our hardware every 3 years because actually it can last longer than that. Because, when you look at carbon footprint, such as phones, etc., I think 90% of the carbon footprint of a phone is when it's actually made, when it's first manufactured. So if you can elongate that, you're then continuing to save money for the organization and doing your bit for saving the planet.
Yeah, and I love that because here in the U.S., our story's really been around responsible sustainability. It's really around a circular economy and reuse and repurpose and when it makes business sense, then then there's plenty of stakeholders, and then it becomes part of your DNA and your culture.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you. I really appreciate that perspective on it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get ready to.
It's how IT leaders.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Brad. I was just going to say.
Yeah.
I did a presentation, at one of the events, an IT leaders charity event, and that for me was how can IT leaders become superheroes? Really, that for me is it's those measures as you talked about, the circular economy, the reuse, the recycle, etc., so that they can save the organisations money, especially when money's very tight, but also feel that they are making a difference.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to land the plane here with us. We were talking earlier around Microsoft and Microsoft AI and Copilot in particular, but is there anything particular in the Microsoft ecosystem that you're particularly excited about?
Well, we're playing around with Copilot at the present time, actually, and it is exciting to see because, as you're probably aware, Brad, they put Copilot in with all their products across their whole product range, across the whole products.
Right.
Yeah. So, and actually, the event that I went to, the Microsoft Cloud Partner Program event, is now renamed to Microsoft AI Cloud Partner.
Right.
So, but yeah, that for me is exciting. Seeing what we can do with Copilot. How is that going to help organisations to be more effective, efficient, and effective? But also to do so responsibly, have that governance in place. And that's really building upon, say, the Power Platform where you've got the low code, you've got your citizens, developers, and it's making sure that an organisation gives its staff, its employees, the ability to use the tool, but do so in a responsible way and having some sort of level of governance so that the data is still going to stay within the remains, the confines of that organisation, and you've got your appropriate data classification, sensitivity controls applied as well.
Super good. Sean, I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
Me too, Brad.
Thank you for giving us some of your time. I've appreciated it, my friend. Any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
Well, no, I think ultimately, I've also very much enjoyed our conversation, and I hope that it's been of use to people that listen to it.